Greetings from LA, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journeys, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2024. And that brings us to a title which has been designated by Criterion at spy number 1220. And this is a work which is described as being from the year 1996. And the names of the directors are the Wachowskis. And the name of the work is Bound. This is the work, the really amazing, electrifying work, which is described as being from the year 1996. And the names of the filmmakers are the Wachowskis, written and directed by the Wachowskis. And we have also wonderful cinematography by Bill Pope, musical score by Don Davis, and others. I will speak a little bit about the um, the wonderful production and crew members when we speak a little bit later about some of the supplements that are included with this Criterion release. But that's not all, because in front of the camera, the great acting and performances, you have this stellar gathering of cast of characters, actors, included in which are, for example, Jennifer Tilly and Gina Gershon and Joe Pantoliano and Christopher Maloney, John Ryan. It's an amazing group of performers here that are gathering here for this, as I say, electrifying work. This is the film which is Bound. So Bound is in the Criterion Collection physical media catalog. As I understand it too, I know that there have been other previous releases of this outside of Criterion by other labels of this great film over the course of its wonderful history since its initial release in '96. So it's had, I understand, a quite healthy physical media or home movie or home video release history, which is great. But adding to that is, again, this year, the new chapter in that healthy home media release history of this film, which is now this new chapter being the new Criterion release. And it's described as being a new 4K digital restoration. Let's speak a little bit later in this video about our thoughts and comments and reactions to how this looks and sounds, courtesy of this new release by Criterion this year. But I mean, this is splendid news. This is absolutely splendid news that a work by the Wachowskis is included in the physical media catalog of Criterion. That's wonderful news. And it's a film that is bound, which is itself again, so many things at once, so many things happening at once. And so let's think about some of those things that, as I try to describe it here, are quote unquote happening at once. So what does that mean? And so if I were to try to describe my feelings of this film Bound, I think I would first try to address what I see as the sort of story or plot structure of this film. And I think immediately we are welcomed into this world of the mayhem and chaos and suspense and tension, already with a very provocative image of a character who is tied up or bound, as it were, in a very seemingly of a situation that might involve some kind of violence or some kind of aftermath of violence or something. I mean, we're not quite sure because it's a very provocative image, but the image is revealing much, but again, not revealing much at all. So the mystery is established and some kind of suspense or tension is established. We know from the outset, therefore, that this is a film that, again, I think the phrase that's been used a lot, I think very apropos, although I think there's some nuances to it, which is the phrase film noir or neo noir, which itself is, I think, is very. Those are phrases that carry with it a lot of import, but I think that those lenses are very appropriate in the case of considering a work like Bound, because this is a mystery. This is a film that is involving maybe a crime or a heist or a plot of some sort, and whether or not that crime or heist is successful is part of the allure of watching this film like Bound. And part of that, or going into a little bit more details of that, we are then uh, in a sort of mind-bending way, traversing time and chronology, because then we understand that from the provocative nature of this opening moment of the film, we are seemingly thrust back in time to before these events of someone being tied up seem to have occurred, and so that brings us to being introduced to the characters and the apartment building complex and the rooms and what is going to be happening in this essentially almost film, which is essentially involving a very limited number of spaces and settings, primarily located, although there are some exceptions of course, but primarily located in the apartment building rooms that are going to become so critical in the context of the story Bound. And then, therefore, we are introduced to this setting and setup, but we are also, of course, introduced to the characters. And we see Gina Gershon's Corky, who is already seemingly maybe out of prison after some time being in jail for some circumstances in her past life, which we will get to know about a little bit as the film progresses and as we learn more about who she is and her background. And we see her working as a house painter in one of the apartment building rooms. And so this is again part of her maybe trying to get her life back in some kind of order after again being in prison for a number of years. And then we also see her uh, interaction or chance meeting with some of the other main characters of this film. And so that is Violet, who is Jennifer Tilly character, and then also Caesar, who is Joe Pantoliano's character. And they meet by chance in the elevator because we then quickly learn that Violet's room and the room where Caesar and Violet will go is actually the room that is next to, immediately neighboring the room that Corky, the Gina Gershon character, is doing the house painting and the work. And not just house painting, I should say. She's also working the plumbing and unclogging the drains and fixing the bathrooms, etc., which is also a kind of key plot point and also a key thematic point as well, that as we will see over the course of our watching of the film Bound. So that's the essential setup, but that's of course not all. There is from the setup so much of a jumping off points, because we understand that the organized crime is involved when we get to learn a little bit more about who Caesar's character is and what he does in the context of organized crime, which will then raise the stakes in the context of, say, crime and money laundering, uh, in many senses of that phrase, and then also the sense of stealing money or absconding with the cash. And there's going to be a lot of cash that's going to be involved in this work Bound. And when certain plots are hatched and when certain suspicions are aroused, and certain sort of almost Machiavellian movements are made, then plot twist adds upon plot twist, and so then the question becomes, who does one trust, and what has happened with the money, and what will be the stakes, especially when more players enter the picture, because, as I say, we are dealing with organized crime. And there are also very volatile and dangerous implications with this, and that is the introduction of characters that are involved in the crime or the crime part of this film, such as the Christopher Maloney character and the John Ryan character, etc. So when the stakes are raised, what will happen to, again, our core, say, trio of characters that made up of Joe Pantoliano's character and Jennifer Tilly's character and Gina Gershon's character, and what will be their, how their, say, motivations, transfixed as they are in the various character arcs as they're developing through the film, what will happen over the course of this. So this is in one of the components of this, which is a heist film, a crime film, a suspense film, and a film noir or neo-noir type of film. And so I think in those ways, this film can be classified and regarded, and I think very, very legitimately and reasonably so. I mean, in that way, it is a film that is about this kind of suspense or tension, which is absolutely brilliantly rendered. But that's not all. And that's one of the reasons why this film is so lauded and so celebrated as it is, because it's so multi-layered and so multi-textured. And it goes in ways, as I say, twist upon twist upon twist. And I use the word twist in a way to suggest that upon first viewing, it goes in directions that, and even maybe on repeated viewing, it goes in ways that really are so surprising in the way that it twists. I mean, one almost suspects or expects a twist to go in a certain way, which is a little bit of a contradiction in terms, perhaps. But you know what I mean. You know, sometimes there are certain expectations of genre that go along with these types of classifications or categorizations or descriptives that are used in some of the critical and reviews of this film, Bound. You know, so one expects this type of setup or maybe conventions, and perhaps yes, the film Bound, as we watch it, goes into certain conventions in this manner, but what is one of the great surprises, one of the lovely elements of this film Bound, is it goes in ways that seem to go in a certain direction, then go in a different direction, then go in a completely different direction, then go back to where we thought it might have gone, and then go back into something else entirely. Or it might return to where it once was, or it might go into something else indeed. Again, does it or does it not? You'll have to decide when you watch the film. So in that way, it's a thorough, entertaining, delightful, and suspenseful work indeed, filled with a lot of tension, with a lot of wonderful stylistic touches as well, in terms of, say, ways that camera flourishes suddenly burst upon the screen, the way that we have almost virtuoso in terms of slow motion and bullets, and how time seems to almost stop and stand still. Suddenly we have almost special effects types of moments that are really punctuating an already high tension work, which is utterly outstanding. It's again a showcasing of the prowess of the filmmakers, the Wachowskis, and their artistic craft. You know, despite the limited budget and the limited shooting schedule that was involved in their feature film debut, director debut, as it were. So really wonderful. And also, you know, I have to go to what is one of the great strengths of this, which is the characterizations. And at the heart and soul of this film could be said to be this trio of characters portrayed by Joe Pantoliano, Caesar, and Jennifer Tilly, Violet, Vi, and Corky, portrayed by Gina Gershon. And perhaps to go even further, the heart and soul of this film is the relationship between Violet and Corky. This is a really great depiction of their character arcs and their stories. I mean, they're meeting with each other, and this is part of the allure and the way in which this film, I think, welcomes us in. Because we have certain expectations, perhaps, in terms of film noir or neo-noir aspect that might lead us to expect where this relationship might go. The phrase that's used, I think, and I'm going to try to be careful here because it's something that is referred to a little bit later in the supplements, which I want to talk to you about a little bit, which is the phrase femme fatale, end quote. And so I find that that type of expectation is certainly there, potentially anyway, when considering how we as audience members are introduced to these characters, Corky and Violet, and whether or not those expectations, or whether or not those, say, whether or not those expectations are realized, or that they reach those points at the end of the drama of the film. Again, you're going to have to watch the film to find out. But there are certain circuitous, very twisty ways that such avenues of expectations may or may not be traversed over the course of the film. Let me put it that way, which makes for incredibly enticing drama and incredibly realized drama that also has a lot of heart and soul and passion and emotion, and this emotion and passion is expressed psychologically. It's expressed very soulfully. It's expressed physically. It's expressed in a way that is very moving and very touching, thus making the drama of their story punctuating the suspense and tension of the crime heist caper aspect of this film, and the two points really support each other in a way that just makes everything as a whole even more heightened, which is, I think, such a perfect balance, a perfect combination. And as I say, it does go to the way in which we are drawn to these characters. The the relationship between Corky and Violet is one of those, as I say, it's so brilliantly rendered. This film is in many ways too a love story. This is a love story. And as with many love stories that we might see in cinema or in literature, it's a love story that potentially has many ups and downs. It has maybe bursts of emotional intensity and physical intensity and love and sex and sexual attraction. It also has its adverse points, and there are a lot of points of adversity that will await Violet and Corky as they try to maneuver themselves through this very dangerous world of Bound, and whether or not they will be successful, and whether or not their relationship itself will survive, and whether or not their feelings for each other will survive, and perhaps whether or not those feelings are themselves uh, there or not. That's also part of the maybe tension as well of this film. Again, you're going to have to watch the film to find out if you're interested. But the point is that this relationship is incredibly represented here, which I think makes our feelings for the characters even more pronounced when you watch it. And there's so much love and tenderness as well that's expressed, which is incredibly well done, regarding the great way in which the relationship between Violet and Corky is depicted. I mean, this is a relationship that where they love each other. There is an intense physical and emotional attraction. And so the aspects of this relationship, the lesbian relationship between them, is given so much, I think, sensitivity and delicacy and room to respect who they are. I mean, these characters are, and the film doesn't shy away from depicting that, I think, in frank, honest terms, which is something that will be addressed a little bit later in, say, some of the supplements of this film, of this Criterion release. But to make a little bit of a mention here, there is something of things like how the physicality is itself expressed, and how that doesn't have a kind of taint of exploitation, but rather it has the feeling of a genuine sort of a genuine type of treatment, which I find really quite. I mean, it's incredibly moving to see, and that's making their story and our involvement in their lives and in their story even more involved, and thus making our feelings of tension even raised even higher, as I mentioned before, when we are reminded of the world that they are inhabiting, and the violence that is awaiting them in terms of the crime and the money and the organized crime, and Caesar and what he will do, etc. So uh, it is a very tender and very genuine aspect, which I admire very much. And also, we will speak a little bit later too about how this film has many aspects of it that are expressed, or that are touching upon directly and indirectly aspects of sex and sexuality, of gender, and then also to just a quick mention about some of the other performances. I mean, I mentioned people like Christopher Maloney, who has this great volatile aspect to his character, which really makes it even more tense indeed. John Ryan, a legend that is John Ryan, who has this phenomenal presence, and of course the one, the only Joe Pantoliano as Caesar. who is just nothing short of amazing. And it is his psychological take on the character that makes his relationship with Violet even more stakes raising. And also his relationship with Violet too adds a further dimension in terms of say, what is described by people like B. Ruby Rich and others in terms of the way this film depicts aspects of masculinity and femininity, especially in the context of relationships between men and women in the film Bound, specifically the relationship between between Violet and Caesar, and I guess by extension between Corky and Caesar as well. But how the relationships between the men and the women of the film, how they seem to be paralleling or contrasting with the relationships between the women in the film, that being specifically Corky and Violet, and how certain expressions of feelings in, say, one relationship might be expressed in a completely different way in the context of another relationship. Thus, again, creating even more of a discussion point or discussion points with respect to how this film treats sexuality and gender and aspects of identity, and doing it in a way that is always integral and organic to the plot and the growth of the characters, which is so wonderfully structured that I think it's a film that has not only aged very well and very gracefully, but in fact it's become so, I think, relevant and so prescient and so current, which I find again makes a film that is again so exciting, and its electricity lasts even many years after its initial release in '96. So bravo for this film, for being so many things at once, and for being a film that is also so entertaining, so suspenseful, and so thrilling, and so filled with a lot of visual flares that are eye-catching, to say the least, and they are mind-blowing and explosive fireworks from the Wachowskis and company. And then just once again applauding the brilliance of the performances. I mean, Jennifer Tilly is kind of revelation. And this was, as she acknowledges in some of the others supplements, I mean, this was around the time when she got a lot of attention in terms of Academy Award nominations for another film that she appeared around the same time, and just a really emerging on the scene in a way that was very that was legacy defining in a way, and so that's really quite brilliant indeed. And then also to Gina Gershon, who also has a similar type of legacy defining period during this film, making of this film, and she mentions this too in some of the other supplements. Incredible performance that she gives. I mean, she has, as she describes it, she has this great quality in terms of being the look of a type of film noir anti-hero of the sorts, almost like a Marlon Brando type, as she mentions it herself, which is such a great comparative point. But of course, that's not the only aspect of her character. So many other aspects of the character, which we'll talk a little bit about later in the supplements. But and then Joe Pantoliano giving such almost a type of a childlike, innocent quality, which lends to a sense of potential sympathy for this character that also can turn quite vicious and quite stunningly vicious, thus making for a real volatile cocktail or combination indeed. This is a standout work. This is a work that is so mind-blowing in many respects, and it continues to be. And this is the work from the Wachowskis, that is Bound. The Criterion Collection has released this film, Bound, courtesy of this new 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo edition, which is what I have in front of me here. And it is purported to be based upon a new 4K digital restoration. I have the 4K disc in the player behind me right now. And please note, once again, it's one of these wonderful 4K or Blu-ray 4K disc menus where we have the moving images, a montage of shots from the film with the sound overlaid. So It's a really lovely assembly of moments from the film. However, just for the sake of YouTube and YouTube copyright, again, I don't want to risk offending the YouTube copyright gods, so I have just blocked it off for purposes of the video. So I apologize for that. If it's an eyesore, I really apologize for that. But I hope you can understand. But it's really great. So if you do get a chance to get a copy of the Criterion release, that will await you when you put the disc into the machine. But we should speak a little bit about the master or the materials here. And I've also removed, prior to the start of making this video, the insert, which is part of the release here. And we'll talk more about the insert later. But we have here let's see here. Yes, here we have the information about the master, which is on one of the pages here, and I quote, "Bound is presented in the aspect ratio of 1.85 to 1, supervised and approved by cinematographer Bill Pope. This new 4K digital master of the unrated international version was created from the 35mm original camera negative and a 35mm interpositive in some sections. The original 5.1 surround soundtrack was remastered from the digital master files. The feature is presented in Dolby Vision HDR, high dynamic range, on the 4K Ultra HD disc, and high definition SDR, standard dynamic range, on the Blu-ray." So, yes, this is a good point to make. My understanding is that this is the unrated international version, and my understanding too is there's a specific point in one of the critical scenes where I think the theatrical cut released in the U.S. had a certain omission or a deletion of some aspect of it, and I'm talking about one of the sex scenes that happens earlier in the film. So, which is described, I think, a little bit later in some of the supplements with more specificity. But that's my understanding. And so I should also note there's another change involving the names, the Wachowskis, as it appears in the titles or in the closing credits. And so in terms of the Wachowskis and how the Wachowskis were how they were identified in the credits when this film was released in 1996, and how they are identified in the credits for purposes of this release in 2024. So now let me just speak to the presentation itself. I think this looks great. I think it sounds really great. My experience with the film is that I don't have all the releases of this film prior to the Criterion release, so it's hard for me to make, or it's impossible for me to make any kind of specific comparative analysis of that. So I apologize for not being able to do that, but I hope you can understand. But I've always admired this film, and I think it's just revealed more of itself as times passed. And so I remember first watching it many, many years ago, and really being absorbed and surprised by it, and the like. And then now over time, it's a film that, as I mentioned before, has really, I think, become so current and continued on with its currency in many ways. And so I find, therefore, watching this now on the occasion of this Criterion release, being able to discover so many new things, and I think that's largely due to the way it looks and sounds here. I mean, it feels like, on the one hand, it does feel like aspects of films from this era, 1990s, 1990s low budget action films that were also part of the conversation back in the day, and they still are, I admit. But there was a kind of period in the 90s where you had all these action films that I think gained a lot of prominence, especially during the emergence of the marketability of what is described as the 90s American indie film movement, in a manner of speaking. So Bound has certain, I mean, it's not wholly in that category, I understand, but it has certain connective tissue with that, say, cinema period. And so, as a 90s film, I think there are a lot of those great 90s moments of the way that phones look, the way that blocking occurs, the way that the revelations reveal themselves, etc. So that feeling, that psychological feeling, I think is intact as I watch this presentation. At the same time, I feel like there are so many details that I am able to catch now, even down to things like how little droplets of blood look on the floor, or the floor tile designs, or the way that like a picture looks on the wall, especially when the glass is fractured, or things in the distance that are happening in the background that are happening while something in the foreground is happening. And there's a really famous shot early on when you have Joe Pantoliano appearing in the foreground as he's entering the room, while in the background we have Jennifer Tilly's Violet and Gina Gershon's Corky in the background after uh, having their first sexual encounter, and they're just trying to recover as not to get caught as Caesar enters the room. And so we have the foreground and background interaction, which is so well delineated, and you can make out so many things in the frame. And so I'm so pleased and impressed with how this looks, as well as the sound quality here as well. I mean, part of the, or not part, but one of the main reasons for this film's success is how the sound is employed. I didn't even mention this before, but the concept of the two rooms, the apartment rooms that are neighboring each other, and the thin wall that is separating the two, and also we have pipes and the plumbing and the drainage and things, and with the tin of the metal that also allows for echoes of voices in one room being heard in another, etc. I mean, this is also the stuff that makes this film bound so captivating. And so the soundscape, I think, is really reflected so brilliantly in how I watch this film and hear this film, courtesy of this Criterion release. So I'm very impressed. Again, I apologize. My expertise in terms of the release history is again next to nil. But again, relying on how I've seen this film from years past up to now, and then now watching it now, I find it's both a film that is very much reminding me of my wonderful joys of watching this upon first discovering it many years ago, and then also discovering new things. So I am overall, once again, very impressed with how this looks and sounds. And so now let us turn our attention to some of the supplements. And the first place I'd like to go to is the commentary track. Now, once again, we have the Criterion Collection release having this 4K UHD and Blu-ray combo edition, which is what I have here. So if you opt for this edition, you can get the two discs. So first is the 4K UHD disc, and then you can get the Blu-ray disc. So you can watch the film on either disc, HDR choice or SDR choice, 4K disc or Blu-ray disc, your choice. And I think the film looks and sounds stellar, whatever you choose. But also, when you watch the film on either disc, you will have the option of listening to the commentary as you watch the film. So this is true for the Blu-ray. It's also true for the 4K UHD disc. So I have the 4K disc in the player right now, so let me just turn to what it says about the commentary track. And I quote, "This commentary track, recorded in 1997, features directors Lana Wachowski and Lilly Wachowski, editor Zach Steinberg, and technical consultant Susie Bright. They are joined later in the track by actors Joe Pantoliano, Jennifer Tilly, and Gina Gershon. To listen to the commentary while viewing the movie, press the audio key on your remote at any time." And so this is really great. So again, it's described as being from the year 1997, and the Wachowskis are. I mean, it's a wonderful, wonderful rapport, and it's very low key, very casual, and very friendly. And as I say a little bit later, the first part of the commentary track is focusing in on Susie Bright's comments as Zach Steinberg, the editor, and the Wachowskis. And then we have the actors joining a little bit later. So, but this is really wonderful indeed. So Susie Bright, first of all, the Wachowskis are mentioning how, or Susie Bright's also mentioning how she was invited to participate in this film, and how there are aspects of, say, how what Susie Bright describes in terms of depictions of lesbian relationships and also feelings and emotions that are through this lens, how these depictions were not so common in 1996. And in fact, this makes this film, when it was released, very I mean, it stood out because of the way it does depict the relationship between Violet and Corky, both in a physical way and in an emotional way. And so Susie Bright describes her role in this film. There's a little part that she plays in a bar, interacting with Gina Gershon's Corky. But also in terms of the production, she is lending her guidance, lending her advice, and also she mentions too how she was talking about how to, giving her advice, for instance, about how to depict and how to portray with a sense of authenticity and accuracy in a way that's giving sort of fidelity and respect to the emotions and almost the physicality of how to depict the lesbian relationship between Corky and Violet. So she's talking to about how things like the pipes and the moisture, how this lends to a kind of heightened sense of the passion and intensity, and also how Violet and Corky express their love and attraction towards each other, and how I mean, the mechanics of the love making also are discussed in some detail here as well, which is again a way to also express how much the artists here feel, Susie Bright is well included, how they feel that this film is in no way trying to exploit this relationship. I mean, it does have aspects of sex and sexuality, but it is felt that it's not done in a way that is exploiting the situation, or done in a way that is, say, from a perspective other than the perspective that's giving their relationship in terms of emotionality and intense love, and the soulfulness and the physicality and that respect. And so I think that those comments, and also as expressed too by the Wachowskis and others here, I think, and expressed otherwise, and in other parts of the comment and in the supplements, excuse me, I think that really gives so much voice to just how well done this film gives the room for our characters, Corky and Violet, to really live their lives and to show themselves who they are, and to not shy away from certain, say, feelings that are there to essentially show us who they are, who their souls are, who their characters are. And, part of their souls and characters is their attraction and their feelings towards each other. And those feelings are very naturally expressed through their bodies and through their sex. And so this is, and through their sexuality. And so this is incredibly important and potent. So I find that very illuminative indeed. And then also aspects of the commentary talk about the technical prowess. They also speak to about the limited nature of the budget and how they had to really make decisions about how to get things done. And I mean, we're reminded too about the limitations of budget, but when you watch the film, you can barely see. It's so virtuoso. It doesn't feel, I mean, it feels so high budget in a lot of places, because a lot of the great things that are done, it captivates your attention. So these reminders about what their limitations were, the Wachowskis and others, I mean, just again, another thing that is incredible, genius. It just boggles the mind in terms of the heightened levels of their creativity on display. So this is really great. And then talking about, again, some of the symbolism here, and I mentioned a little bit too, pipes and unclogging drains and the moisture and the dripping, and it's oozing with this type of symbolism, and it was done on purpose, and to capture that in a way that has this heightened operatic value, it's really quite wonderful. And also to some of the other say cinematic reference that are made here, because another great thing about this film, again, as multi-textured and multi-layered as it is, it has one of its layers is how it feels like an homage to, say, the cinematic legacy of film noir, while also doing its own thing at the same time. And so it does have touches of double indemnity. Filmmakers and films like of Billy Wilder and Alfred Hitchcock are mentioned. Also, in terms of Joe Pantoliano's character, the treasure of the Sierra Madre is mentioned as well, which is really great. And two, I should mention about how this film, as it's discussed in the commentary, does go along with certain expectations of the genre of film noir, while also doing things that are seemingly, from certain perspectives, quite unexpected from, say, perspectives of maybe some of the executives that were involved in making this film Bound. But from the perspective of the Wachowskis and Susie Bright and others, making the choice of making the main characters Violet and Corky, making those choices and making them characters who are women portrayed by Jennifer Tilly and Gina Gershon. I mean, these are choices that maybe from the point of view of certain executives that they encountered was a real radical and unexpected thing, especially in a film that was made and released in '96. But from their point of view, this was something that was very natural and organic to the story. And it wasn't just a case of, we could easily change one of our main characters who is a woman. We can just simply change her to be a male character, and that will make the movie. And it wasn't like that at all for the Wachowskis. And so this is something that is, I think, that comes out in terms of how much they believed in the story, how much they really were caring for the characters as they depicted them in the writing and preparing of the story, and how that vision was left intact when they encountered a number of people who really believed in that, such as Susie Bright, such as others that aren't in the commentary directly but are mentioned, Dino De Laurentiis, etc. So, as well as other people that become very integral to the making of this film. Speaking of which, the latter half of the commentary, we do get Joe Pantoliano, and a little bit later Gina Gershon and Jennifer Tilly. So it's great to hear that. I mean, Gina Gershon has this great, lovely, low-key, casual aspect to the way she talks on the commentary, which I really love, and it's a great contrast. It's almost the high energy of Jennifer Tilly. I mean, Jennifer Tilly comes in and just, in a lovely way, captures the attention in the room in a manner of speaking. So I love her. I love that back and forth. And they speak a little bit too about Jennifer Tilly and the voice of Violet, and how the voice changes register depending on who she's speaking to, which is so great. And Jennifer Tilly's, one of the great things about Jennifer Tilly too, it's here in this film Bound, it's also in some of the other films that she's in, or I think maybe most of the other films that she's in. It's one of the great aspects of her performances is her voice, and how she can use her voice and transform her voice in a way that is really quite unforgettable. And again, different registers in the film, which I never really realized until I heard that. So it's great. It's really great. This is a great commentary. Again, it's from 1997, and so it's still. I mean, it still feels very fresh and very current indeed. So wonderful commentary track. So please check it out if you have the opportunity. So now what I've done is I have taken out the 4K disc and I've put in the Blu-ray disc. And so this is the Blu-ray disc. And so again, like the 4K disc, we have the Blu-ray menu with the montage of moving images as part of the menu. So just keep that in mind as well. It's a great menu, by the way. But the reason why I've put in the Blu-ray disc right now at this timing is to speak to about the supplements that are part of this Criterion release. So once again, for the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo edition from Criterion, the film can be found on either disc, or the 4K disc and the Blu-ray disc. The commentary, optional commentary, can also be heard when you watch the film on the 4K disc and then when you watch the film on the Blu-ray disc. But if you're going to go try to find the supplements, they're not going to be found on the 4K disc. They will be only found on the Blu-ray disc, which is the reason why I have it in the player right now. And so let me scroll down to the menu where it says supplements, and I press on that. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 supplements. that are here. So my understanding is that some of these are taken from an earlier release. I think it's the Arrow release, and then there are others that are taken from, I think it's the Olive release. And then there's one that I think is Criterion specific. So it's a combination of a number of the supplements that have been made about this film over the course of the release history of this. And again, I apologize. My expertise when it comes to the release history of this film bound is very bad indeed. So I apologize for that. But that's a good thing for me and this Criterion release, because it seems to be an umbrella of a number of things that have been made about this film over time. And so I'm glad to have it being gathered here for purposes of today, this 2024 release. So with that, let me start with the first one, which is called Pipeline to Seduction. This is described as: the following video essay, written and narrated by film critic Christina Newland, was produced by the Criterion Collection in 2024. So this is a Criterion exclusive supplement, or Criterion produced supplement, I should say. It's totaling approximately 17 minutes. And this is a video essay with Christina Newland's voice overlaid as we see the video. So it's this video essay structure, which I admire very much, and it's a really great one, absolutely great, because Christina Newland speaks about a number of things, again, about in the context of the 1996 release, and also how it could be read, or how one ways in which this film bound can be read or enjoyed or engaged with, even in this time of 2024. And there is acknowledging that one of the aspects that is so fascinating, so brilliant about this film bound, is how it deals with maybe subverts expectations about depictions of sex and sexuality in cinema, and almost having a setup which might seem to be just almost this quality of use of sort of heightened symbols that might lend itself almost immediately to almost parodies of depictions of sex on screen on the one hand, but the film bound subverts those expectations, or not expectations, but subverts those maybe conventions of genre, if you will, and regards the film, or regards the characters, not in the context of how Christina Newland describes it in terms of the sense of, say, a sex as male fantasy, as it's described here in the video essay, but rather sex as it's expressed and felt by the characters in the moment, and those being Violet and Corky respectively. And so in that way, a lot of the conventions, and thus maybe the visual imagery, is turned on its head and turned upside down, topsy-turvy, in a way that's always being very faithful and being very respectful to the world, and also being very organic, and also leading us down this really circuitous, wild path of violence and suspense and tension, given the plot involving the money and the heist. So it all connects together, and I think Christina Newland does a really excellent excerpt, a real professional and brilliant job with explaining this here. And two, just the symbols that are mentioned here, things like, as I mentioned, drains and moisture, and also receptacles, and things like drain pipes, etc., and also gestures of the hands. Hands are very important in this film, in a way in which one character is able to connect with another character with hands and hand gestures and hand movements. I mean, this has very important physical and sexual connotation with it as well. It also has with it a very a plot-driven violence connotation as well, because there are also key scenes in the film involving hands and clippers and fingers, etc. So the way in which hands are depicted are very important, as well as again, not just the physical interaction, but also the emotional interaction, the close-ups. What does it mean when one hand grabs another hand in a kind of embrace, and what does that mean in terms of the fulfillment of the characters going forward? So these close-ups were captured so well in these virtuoso shots, sometimes of close-ups on faces, close-ups on the hands from above. shots that are maybe suggestive of in terms of the frenzied and expert pace of the editing, etc. So incredible, absolutely incredible. And then too, some of the cinematic and literary references that are cited here. Sin City is cited, as I mentioned. Billy Wilder, Alfred Hitchcock is cited as well in terms of the work by the Wachowskis and also cinematographer Bill Pope. A great collaboration, by the way. And then also too, the idea again, as Christina Newland describes it here, how this film got made and how it was perhaps maybe in '96 not marketable from a commercial film standpoint in '96 to create a film that was, as described here, a lesbian-focused neo-noir film. But that Dino De Laurentiis was very open to the idea. That's lending his support to this, and then how the depictions of the characters here, for instance, the character of Corky, maybe prior to Dino De Laurentiis, other executives that the Wachowskis were meeting to try to get this film off the ground, maybe were suggesting to them that maybe, oh, let's just change Corky from a woman to a man. And then we'd be very interested in that kind of thing. So, but the Wachowskis, to their great credit, did not yield to those sorts of requests, but rather felt, I think, very rightly and justifiably so, that that wasn't the story. I mean, the story was and is one between Corky and Violet, and so. And then too, speaking of Corky, Gina Gershon's performance, which I mean, it's a brilliant performance. I should have mentioned more in the earlier discussion, but let me take the time to mention it here now. I mean, it is so layered and it feels so honest, and it's so laid back, and there's so much baggage and weight from the past of Corky that we understand, and there's almost kind of a cynicism, maybe even a nihilistic streak that's part of that as well, but it's awoken in some way or inspired in some way by her feelings for Violet and the situation. Maybe it's stemmed from a sense of wanting to help, or a suggestion of maybe some kind of trouble, but also a real genuine rush of emotion, which I think is so. And Gina Gershon has this great way of expressing it. It's so great. I love it so much. And as Christina Newland mentions it here, aspects of how Gina Gershon's Corky and aspects of her own identity and her own sexuality are also part of how this film bound, I think, is given a sense of feeling of respect and room for the characters to grow in their own ways. And part of the ways for Gina Gershon's Corky is, I mean, it's described here in this phrase by Christina Newland, and I quote, masculine presenting ex-con lesbian. And it's expressed here too, how those expressions of her character do emerge in certain aspects of, say, the environment or the decor, and also the way that Corky herself presents, and certain aspects of her manner and demeanor, and how that manner and demeanor might be transformed or changed or altered depending on who else is in the room with her. And there are some very interesting exchanges that go on, even in some quick moments. For instance, there's a bar scene where she is seen interacting with some of the people there, and so there's some interesting layers going on there, as well as the way that she's interacting with Caesar, and of course, perhaps even most prominently, most intensely, the way she's interacting with Violet. And those interactions, I should say, are interactions where she's there in the room physically, or maybe there's a wall separating them there, so they're talking via telephone line, or maybe they're listening in because of the thinness of the wall or the tin of the echo of the pipes, etc. So Gina Gershon's performance is dynamite, absolutely dynamite. So I'm glad that it's given attention here, as well as the attention given to some of the other great performances I mentioned. Jennifer Tilly, without question, here. So Pipeline to Seduction. This is incredibly great, incredibly great. I mean, it is great and it is incredible. And some other details that Christina Newland mentions here. So the arterial nature of the pipes and the lines. I may mention that, but there's a sort of organic way that the environments are connected. And I think there's sexual connotations to that as well, sexual symbolism to that as well. There's also the way it just feels like Violet and Corky are just connected somehow, you know. And so even when they're physically separate, they're still connected. So and it's expressed in how the pipes are done, and also to the sound and the soundscapes, as are mentioned here, how that connectivity is also expressed through how we can listen into the sound. So there's also the sense too of voyeurism through sound. They're listening in, eavesdropping, perhaps, which also has certain elements of the film noir, neo noir convention. But it also very much part of the characterizations. As I say, it's another symbol or another way of suggesting to us, the viewers, that Gina Gershon's Corky and of Jennifer Tilly's Violet are connected. They're connected by sound, even though they might be physically separated, which is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And two, talking to you about the camera movements here. Bill Pope's camera has this gliding, beautiful, smooth quality to it, and using a lot of dolly tracks, as Christina Newland mentions it as well. A lot of boxes and traps are mentioned. The pattern on the floors, a sort of tripartite pattern, triangular partite pattern, which is suggestive of the trio triumvirate of our main characters, Caesar, Violet, and Corky. It's such great symbolism catches here by Christina Newland. It's absolutely great. And also, too, again, it's returning to the aspect here, which is another very prominent part of this, which is to remind us too that this was a very at the time, this was a film where at the time, in terms of a mainstream film, you'd almost never see lesbian sex or a lesbian relationship depicted in this way, in this type of commercial, quote unquote, commercial mainstream film of this way. But and also mentioning Gina Gershon's appearance prior to this film in another very memorable work, another very memorable performance in a film which is called Showgirls. And so but Christina Newland mentions here about how this is, again, it's done in a way that is not meant for exploitation, but rather meant to really enhance and respect the world of the characters and how they feel about each other and who they are. I mean, at the end of the day, one of the great strengths of this film, and indeed of any film, is if the filmmakers are able to show us who these characters are. I mean, whether that is a showing of their feelings and emotions via maybe physical attraction, or maybe their feelings about life, philosophy, about their place in the world, their sense of self, who they are. And that's true for Bound, that's true for any film. But I think the point that Christina Newland is making here is that the great strength of this film, Bound, is that it's able to show us in this captivating way who these characters are at their most essential, vulnerable, and beautiful. So kudos to this great video essay from Christina Newland. It's really wonderful. So please check it out if you can. Approximately 17 minutes. Maybe again, like with the other supplements, my suggestion is to watch the film first, and then you can watch these supplements. But after you've seen the film, it's wonderful analysis. And but that's not all, because continuing on with the supplements, we have next up Gina Gershon and Jennifer Tilly. So when you press this, it won't go into a little sub-menu about a description of what this is, but it'll go straight into the supplement, which is a kind of an interview with Gina Gershon and then an interview with Jennifer Tilly, which is edited together in this supplement, which is approximately 27 minutes. So, which I think is carried over from a previous non-Criterion release. But this is really great. I mean, this is talking about femme fatales, and again, I'll use air quotes for that because I think that is a really loaded phrase, and it's one that I think is, on the one hand, it's suggestive of the ways in which this film has carries certain expectations of the film or neo noir type of film on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's something that is, I think, it itself may or may not be the way in which one can describe, say, characters like Violet and Corky. So let me put it that way. But I understand how it's used here, and I think it's done, to evoke or suggest those sorts of discussion points, because the discussions between Gina Gershon on the one hand, or with Gina Gershon and with Jennifer Tilly here, are phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. They speak here about their interactions with this work, about their interactions with working with the Wachowskis, uh, their entry into this film, how they got the film to begin with. And Jennifer Tilly, this goes into an interesting anecdote about what roles they were up for initially. And Jennifer Tilly was talking about how she was actually maybe going for the role of Corky rather than Violet, and that there were other actors that were in the running or considered for the role of Violet. And I think she mentions actors like Rosanna Arquette and Linda Hamilton. So it's really interesting to consider what kind of film would it have been if Violet were portrayed by one of these other actors and Corky was portrayed by Jennifer Tilly. But very interesting. But as it happens to then Gina Gershon entered into the picture, but then wasn't quite clear between the actors who would play Corky. Would it be Gina Gershon or would it be Jennifer Tilly? So there's an interesting kind of rivalry that's emerging here. I mean, it's done, I think, very respectfully of each other because, ultimately what happens is that Jennifer Tilly, of course, is playing Violet, and then Corky is portrayed by Gina Gershon. So, and the rest, as they say, is history, and it works out quite brilliantly. And so they also describe too some of the ways in which they view their characters. I mean, Jennifer Tilly does mention Violet's nature. There is a way in which she is seen to be, and again, this is from Jennifer Tilly's own perspective, seemingly manipulating some of the players in some of the situations to try to get her way or to reach her objective. And so, but I don't think that's a knock against the character per se, but that's part of the conditions in which she finds herself, the very harsh conditions that she finds herself with her relationship with organized crime and Caesar, etc. And then also on the other hand, Gina Gershon's Corky, Gina Gershon describes, as I mentioned before, having images of like James Dean or Marlon Brando in that role in that depiction, which I think is so apropos. And then two, just trying to get a connection, and these traits of the characters are always serving a kind of emotional core. And so it's interesting, as I mentioned, to see, for instance, how Jennifer Tilly's Violet is interacting with, say, some of the other men in the films, like Caesar or John Ryan's character, etc., or Christopher Maloney's character, etc., and how she's reacting and interacting with the women in the films, or specifically Corky, so portrayed by Gina Gershon. So there's a kind of emotional core that is being attained through their character arcs. And then two, Gina Gershon and Jennifer Tilly in their ways describe how they viewed the depictions of sex and sexuality and the love story between the two characters, and how it was, it's a very intense scene in terms of this love-making scene. And I'm not an actor, and I've never been in that kind of acting situation, let alone in a situation involving acting in a scene involving lovemaking. So, but I can only imagine how uncomfortable or potentially uncomfortable it must have been. So, and it takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of artistic bravery and integrity to be able to do this in a way that is again part of the story. So they do speak about how, and Gina Gershon speaks about how she wanted to maybe try to release the tension as much as possible prior to the start of the scene. So I think she mentions how she approached Jennifer Tilly just a couple hours before the scene would be shot, and then offering like tequila and just to soften the mood and soften the tension. And then just the idea of how technical it was as well. I mean, it was in a shorts. There's sort of one camera movement, but it's in this limited space in a room. And so, in terms of the technical aspects of having to move the camera, which is a large mechanical apparatus, move it around in a way, you had to remove walls, etc. While also the actors needed to maintain this sense of being in the throes of kind of intense emotional and physical ecstasy. And so to have this sort of sweeping one-shot take while maintaining the performance, while also the camera movements had to be technically proficient, and the movements had to be right on spot, etc. And so these details were emerging. And Jennifer Tilly too is talking about how her interaction with Gina Gershon was such that it wasn't like there wasn't a sense of discomfort or anything between it. They were very frank with each other, and they were trying to help each other and support each other in terms of how they would look on screen, and trying to get a perspective in a way that would be flattering to the character, that also be respectful of the characters as well. And so there was this frank rapport and back and forth between the two of them, which is really lovely to hear. And then too, the lasting legacy of this. I mean, there is they speak too about how this film has so many twists and turns, and it's a surprising, exciting fireworks type of display. And just working with the Wachowski brothers, this was a huge deal. And Gina Gershon said she loved working with the Wachowskis, and she knew that this was going to be a really big deal. And over time, we realized that it was, and it is. And then Jennifer Tilly too mentions how maybe the film, when it was released, it wasn't the huge box office success that they might have hoped. There might have been a lot of critical praise for it, especially from certain circles, but maybe it didn't quite take off as well as they would have liked. But it still had this huge following that just grows and grows and grows over time, and it's something that she regards as being really important in terms of her own cinema career and legacy. And so it's wonderful to hear their comments about this. So and other points. So please check this out if you can. This is totaling 27 minutes. It's really quite superb, really, really superb indeed. So please check this out. Next is the same thing. So Joe Pantoliano, when you press it, it doesn't give you a sub menu, I think. So this is approximately 15 minutes. So this is a one-on-one conversation with Joe Pantoliano. And he mentions here, among other things, about how this is, he works, talking about working with the Wachowskis and how he got the role, and how there's an anecdote that he shares here, which is also shared by Gina Gershon in the earlier supplement, about how Dino De Laurentiis didn't necessarily regard Joe Pantoliano at first to be a leading man. He's a character actor, not a leading actor or something like that. So it was a kind of it was a great surprise. Maybe surprise isn't the right word, but it's a wonderful thing that he was able to get the role, Joe Pantoliano, because I mean, he's great in the role. He's absolutely great in this role, and he was able to showcase the reasons why he's great, because otherwise, I mean, everyone's wonderful. And then next up, we have the interview with Joe Pantoliano. This is approximately 15 minutes, which I also understand is carried from another non-Criterion prior release. And here, again, Joe Pantoliano is one of the great strengths of this. And there's an anecdote that's shared here. It's also shared elsewhere, but he talks about how Dino De Laurentiis didn't necessarily regard him as being anything other than, say, a character actor. And so it was great that Joe Pantoliano was eventually able to get this role. He wasn't the first choice, apparently, but he was still able to get it after circumstances went his way. And my goodness, what a performance this is. It's wonderful that he was able to then showcase just how great he is and why he's so great. In many ways, his intensity is what really gives a kind of counterweight or counterbalance that provides this film with so much of its intensity and momentum. And so his performance is it's superb. So here he speaks a little bit about how the circumstances in which he was able to get the role. I mean, it took a little bit of time, but he got the role, and so the rest, as I say, is history. And he also mentions too about how he wanted to make certain choices, not making Caesar wholly villainous, but he wanted to make choices to his character that would also showcase that Caesar's not. He's not, I mean, Caesar is intelligent. I mean, he has certain weaknesses, but he is not weak per se. And he has a lot of confusions, but he is thinking. He is always thinking, and that's what also makes him quite quite compelling, and in the context of certain aspects of the plot, quite dangerous indeed. So he wanted to do that. He didn't want to make him someone that was like a victim of circumstance per se, but he wanted to make Caesar someone that was also an active participant in a manner of speaking. So, and I think he pulls it off really well, and it serves the film to so much benefit, I must say. And then to talking about some of the actors that he's working with, he talks about working with Christopher Maloney, and they had a prior acting relationship as well, which is great. Also working with Gina Gershon and Jennifer Tilly, mentioning to how he enjoys working with Jennifer Tilly and a lot of surprises that she brought in terms of their performance. Because one of the key relationships, as I mentioned, is the relationship between Caesar and Violet. So, and two, just talking about the virtuoso aspect and the great way of working with the Wachowskis, he gives an example of there's a scene involving opening a briefcase and the surprise or shock of looking at what's inside. And to capture this shock and sort of almost the swirling confusion of the paranoia confusion. There's a rig that was set up on his chest, and it had a kind of way of being this unsettling, almost a skewed perspective POV shot, which is really great. So this is an example that he cites about how virtuosic the Wachowskis, or working with Wachowskis, was. So, and also there's a scene, a very famous scene involving paint or involving colors on the floor as well. And so he talks about shooting that scene as well. So, but anyway, this is great. 15 minutes with Joe Pantoliano. This is really, really wonderful. So please check it out if you can. And next, there's the interview with Christopher Maloney, and this is 10 minutes. And so this is also, I understand, taken from another pre-Criterion release. And Christopher Maloney plays a key character, and this is the character of Johnny. So here's Johnny, as the title goes for the supplement. And so he describes Johnny as being a character with very poor impulse control, which is an interesting way of describing it. And also, in terms of the depiction of the character of Johnny and his positioning in the structure of organized crime in the context of Bound, I think he makes some interesting character choices and acting choices, which he talks about here. He describes his performance as one of his choices as not wanting to make Johnny, or he wanted to make Johnny, or aspects that were maybe unintentionally funny, little details. And I think Joe Pantoliano mentions it too, how he admired a detail about how when Johnny, Christopher Maloney, is looking at his watch, he not just tells the time, but he also uses his finger to kind of tell himself where the hour hand is or where the minute hand is. It's something like that as he's telling the time. So it's those little choices like that that make him really great, compelling performance. And again, it's a character that is quite vicious and very dangerous and deadly. But there's also the undercurrent of the maybe the unintentionally funny and almost a slightly buffoonish, and even just completely over his head as to what's going on in certain places, which I think adds a sense of almost kind of sympathy towards his position, which I think is captured so well in the Christopher Maloney performance. And then too, there's some action scenes that involve scenes involving a lot of physicality that are involved. There's a scene in a toilet that's also mentioned too. There's also some climactic scenes involving gunplay, etc. So, and then working with the Wachowskis, as he mentions, is really quite an experience. So another great interview. This time with Christopher Maloney. This is approximately 10 minutes, so please check that out if you can. And then there's a supplement called Modern Noir, which is described as the following program, produced in 2014, features interviews with cinematographer Bill Pope, editor Zach Steinberg, and composer Don Davis. And it's described as being from 2014, so this is also from a previous non-Criterion release. This is totaling 29 minutes, so just about half an hour. And each with their own separate interviews, but then edited together to form this one collective supplement. It's really great. really, really great. So Zach Steinberg talks a little bit about, say, some of the editing choices, also some of the background of the production, Dino De Laurentiis's involvement, also the involvement of the actors Gina Gershon and Jennifer Tilly, and then also Don Davis, the composer, talks about some aspects of musical choices as well. There was maybe a initial type of quality to it, maybe taking cues from minimalist music, Steve Reich or Philip Glass, excuse me, which is really quite fascinating. And also how there's also the sweep of music that he references Ennio Morricone as well, which I never thought about until I heard that. There is a very much Ennio Morricone spirit to the film, and the way that themes are used as well. He talks a little bit too about the creation of a theme that's used in starting how the film opens in the credits. Uh, and then Bill Pope, in terms of how he got involved, they needed to have a director of photography that was cheap, that wouldn't cost a lot of money because the budget was really low to begin with. And so he was introduced. He had prior to making this film, he had worked on a film called Army of Darkness, which I'm a big fan of, by the way. But here we have, yes, Bill Pope's discussions, and of course the relationship between Bill Pope and the Wachowskis, and also Don Davis and Wachowski, etc. It's really wonderful, and it shows in a great example here in Bound. And then they talk to about other aspects about the Wachowskis and their work prior to this feature film directorial debut. They had a script which is called Assassins, which was made in a way that ultimately wasn't in a way that there were certain changes that were made from the writing of it to the ultimate making of it, but how they wanted to essentially direct their own film, which ended up being Bound. And there are some choices here that were made. Again, more aspects of the shooting, also aspects of editing. Speaking of the content of the film, there were some maybe issues that were raised by the MPAA versus whether they could get an R rating or whether they wouldn't be able to get an R rating. That had to do with the way in which this film depicts, that had to do with the lovemaking scene in the film. But it was an interesting kind of anecdote about how there weren't really any substantive changes made, but it seems like the MPA was able to be convinced, given a certain maybe edit here and there, which gives rise to a description as to what the difference is, or one of the differences between the theatrical US version and what's described as the unedited, unrated version. And then we have too the idea of how some of the shooting scenes were just created, some of the virtuosic scenes. There's a scene involving a character falling on the ground, and so we have a very low budget way in which that was created, but it was done so effectively and so cleverly. And it just shows again an example of how genius and how high level thinking the Wachowskis were and are in terms of how creative they were. And then also talking too about other scenes too, like some of the symbols and images that were mentioned here. Susie Bright's very important contributions as well, and talking too about the depictions and the characterization. Caesar as a character, Violet as a character, Corky as a character, and also too there's some interesting ways in which they suggest that there's a lot of connective tissue between this film Bound and a later film that would be made by the Wachowskis, which is called The Matrix. Things like bullet time, how bullet fragments are shown, how time seems to be standing still, playing with time in chronology, etc. So you can definitely see that. I mean, there's also a scene involving like a kind of a matrix grid of glass, and you see a character, it's Caesar, you see a character that's sort of refracted through each of these blocks. They look like ice cubes that are in this grid, which is very much like there's a shot in the Matrix that's very, very similar to that. So, but in any event, this is really wonderful. So this is the program from 2014 with Zach Steinberg and Bill Pope and Don Davis. So it's approximately 29 minutes. So please check this out if you can. And then we have a playing with expectations. And so this is a program, and I quote, "In this program, produced in 2018, Film scholars Jennifer Mormon and B. Ruby Rich share their observations about about the Wachowskis' play on gender roles and sexuality in Bound. So this is this is approximately 14 minutes, and this is from 2018, so I think it's from the Olive release, but it's great to have it here for the Criterion release. This is really wonderful. So Jennifer Mormon and Bieber Rubich are interviewed separately, but it's edited together in this one collective 14-minute supplement, and they do speak about this film in the context of depictions of identity and sexuality, and how this really upends certain expectations of the notions of film noir and neo noir. And heterosexual relationships and lesbian relationships, and B. Ruby Rich and Jennifer Warren speak about this film and its ideas and concepts and depictions of how they describe as straight sex and queer sex as well, and how an interesting dichotomy about how sex between, say, certain characters like Caesar and Violet is depicted kind of off screen. You hear it, but you don't necessarily see it. But maybe sex between Violet and Corky is shown directly in a number of scenes. And again, the showing aspect is in a way that's done not in a manner of exploitation, not in a manner of being outside of the characters and looking in voyeuristically, almost in a kind of fantasy gaze aspect. No, but rather in a way that's inherently true to their feelings between the two of them. So in many ways, it has this sense of honesty to it, which they recognize here. And also, Jennifer Mormon too speaks a little bit about what she regards as kind of hypocrisy, or of depicting gay and lesbian relationships, sexuality during this time in mid to late 1990s, and how there's this type of hypocrisy about how it was a kind of big deal or sort of scandalous, end quote, to depict these sorts of things in commercial mainstream entertainment. But and why was this? But the fact that it's done in this way, and it's done in a way that doesn't call attention to itself per se, but it's done in a way that, again, the forefront of it is to show the intensity of the feelings that Violet and Corky have towards each other. So in that way, it has a sense of again, being speaking to something that's very direct and honest, and which is acknowledged here by the two of them in this discussion. And then two, they also acknowledge too about how there are also aspects of the film in terms of its entertaining value, in terms of its campy value. It has lovely campy qualities to it that they acknowledge here. Again, the over the top nature of how the symbolism is, like the dripping of the sweat and the moisture and the water droplets and stuff, and the tubes and the unclogging of drains, etc., and the juxtaposition of these images and aspects of sexuality. I mean, it's quite over the top, but again, it's done in a way that's still very organic and very true to the film, and very entertaining, and also serving other aspects too. Again, giving us the concept of the multi-textured, multifaceted aspect of this film. There's also B. Rich talks too about moments of the film that really were really that pleased her very much, and really showcased aspects of maybe 70s, 1970s, 1980s. She mentions here in this context the lesbian bar that she describes here, and how she describes in this bar scene, which is very brief in the context of the running time, but even when this short running time period, there are levels of what she describes as sort of depictions of butch, which is I never really considered until I heard this this discussion from B. Ruby Rich. How Corky as a character, and the way that she carries herself, there is an aspect of expression, a butch expression about Corky's character, and when she's interacting with some of the other people in this bar, such as the Susie Bright character. Susie Bright's character, again according to B. Ruby Rich, is displaying even more intense aspects of of Butch, and then we see yet another character that we understand is the companion to Susie Bright's character, who is even more displaying this the attributes of Butch, which is again the layers of Butch is and how that seems to be itself a reflection of Corky's own expression of Corky's identity on the one hand, but also showing how uh, it is again something that's very layered, and to have Susie Bright there as well, who we understand serves as a consultant and guidance for the Wachowskis in many ways in terms of depicting sexuality and lesbian outlook and sort of aspects of sort of social and cultural interaction as well, and how therefore Susie Bright is in fact uh, right in the center of this interaction, I think is even more and quite illuminating indeed. So, and so B. Ruby Rich mentions this as well, and how this is a kind of throwback to aspects of 70s and 80s culture that not necessarily present in the 90s cultures, but it's a lovely reminder of what once was. So uh, and the like. And so it also reminds us too about how we have this idea of what is sex in the world of Bound. You know, on the one hand, sex is a kind of performative act. Sex is something that is, in the words of Violet, it's not something that is always true or authentic to who she is. I mean, look at how she describes her relationship with Caesar, how she describes it to Corky, versus how sex can be something other than performative. It can be something that's very true and expressive of who they are. Again, look at how it's handled in the context of the relation between Violet and Corky. So sex has different meanings. Depending on depending on the characters that are involved, which I think is, I mean, it seems so simple, but it's such a profound statement, really, really profound statement. So, um, yeah, it's and then too, B. Ruby Rich talks here, for instance, about how there seems to be showcasing aspects of masculinity in the context of the characters of Bound, and also showcasing aspects of femininity in the context of Bound that maybe sometimes they might be showcasing aspects of it that are less than flattering. And there might be, for instance, how masculinity as expressed by Caesar's character might have a certain air of the threatening vis-a-vis the character arcs of Violet and Corky. And also vice versa, how from Caesar's perspective, maybe that relationship might be something that is threatening to him. Also, how gender stereotypes in his mind turn into things that might be quite vicious and quite mean, that he might weaponize those, but at the same time, the way that he weaponizes certain aspects that are from different perspectives, say from the perspective of the Violet Corky relationship, they are aspects that are still, again, from a certain perspective, mirroring certain authenticity of the relationship and the feelings between the two. So it's interesting how different perspectives might turn something that's aspects of sexuality from one perspective can be quite vicious and turned and weaponized, but from another perspective can be seen to be very much a type of reflection of authenticity of character and feeling and identity and self-worth. So uh, again, about it's things about perspective and sex in the context of perspective, and also, but at the end of the day, it's things about the whole aspect of identity and worth and self-worth that is at the core of that discussion. I mean, B. Ruby Rich and Jennifer Mormon get to the heart of this so well. And two, Jennifer Mormon talks too about how this is a film that has a certain resonance and prominence and currency to this day, and talking about there are aspects of trans and aspects of explorations of identity, sort of soulful explorations of identity that are very much inherent here in the world of Bound. And you can say too that that kind of similar soulful exploration of identity and who one is also carried through in other works by the Wachowskis, perhaps quite famously in a work like The Matrix, which will come after Bound, as many of us know. And what I love too about their discussion, B. Ruby Rich and Jennifer Mormon here, is that they are very sensitive to they're very sensitive to the Wachowskis themselves. I mean, I think Jennifer Mormon in particular says that it's not her place to. Maybe it's not. It's there might be the temptation, but maybe it's not necessarily the thing to do per se to look at a work like Bound and then automatically say associate it with the Wachowskis, Lilly and Lana Wachowski, and their own lives and their own journeys from the making of Bound in 1996 to where they are now, in 2018, and then now in 2024. So maybe it's not. It might not necessarily be the way of things to look at Bound and automatically transcribe something of that to the lives and journeys of the Wachowskis per se. But at the same time, there are, I think, as Jennifer Mormon does point out and B. Ruby Rich points out, there are aspects of the film Bound that, I mean, if one looks at a film as an expression in one way of the character and the philosophy of the filmmakers behind it, I think there is also this way in which the kind of philosophy and the way in which the film respects the characters and gives the characters the space to live and breathe and grow in a way that is true to themselves in the world of Bound, how that philosophy could be said to be consistent with the philosophy that the Wachowskis apply to their own lives and how they seek to be true to themselves and who they are. And so in that way, I think Jennifer Mormon and B. Ruby Rich really, I think, display, I think, a great deal of sensitivity, while also at the same time acknowledging sort of the significance of the art and the output of the art and the content of a work like Bound as made by the Wachowskis. So I find that to be really insightful indeed. So I got a lot out of this. I really did. So this is approximately 14 minutes. So please check this out if you can. It's really worthwhile. Really worthwhile indeed. And then there's a section called Title Design. And then it says, in this brief program produced in 2018, Patty Podesta discusses her title design in Bound. This is approximately 7 minutes. She talks here about how this was not employing a lot of computer CG effects, but it was done with the use of photography and kind of laser printing. And the sort of physical makeup of the design and a kind of motion controlled camera, which then was, I think, organically employed by the Wachowskis and company to create this really memorable, really cool title sequence. So again, this is approximately 7 minutes, so please check this out if you can. And then the trailers, which is really, it's kind of a you press it and it goes into a number of trailers, and it's like the first trailer has almost like it's focusing in on these speed trains, which it almost feels like train spotting, which is interesting. And I love the sound of the narrator in these great 90s trailer, Gina Gershon. I can't quite mimic it quite well. It's so great, but in any event, please check it out if you Jennifer Tilly. It's great, fantastic. So please check it out if you can, the trailer. So, oh my goodness, I am just I'm out of breath. I am out of breath. I can't quite keep up. I mean, it's great. We got a collection from supplements from all sources, but then gathered here for purposes of this Criterion release, while also giving us some Criterion produced supplement. The first one, indeed, Pipeline to Seduction, as well as the carrying over of the commentary track, really makes for some wonderful, robust exploration of this film, Bound Indeed, and done in a way that is so enlightening, so illuminating, and so respectful. I learned so much. So I think this is great. And so, just to conclude our conversation, let me now turn our attention to some of the other aspects of the physical media release. I just want to point out the great artwork here. Look at this with the close-up depicting one of the key moments of the film, a little bit early on in the film between Gina Gershon and Jennifer Tilly. And then the lovely font here with the bound in this pronounced red. And speaking of red, we have a splash of red here. I wonder what this is. And then some white color here. I wonder if what this is as well, in terms of what it might be in connection with another key moment of the film. Really great stuff. And that black red motif is then flipped in terms of the red background and the black text here for purposes of the. I love too this little rendition here, which is the if you look closely, this is if you look closely, this is Gina Gershon, and pardon me here, I'm falling apart here. I guess I'm just so excited about this release. It's great, so I apologize, but here we go. This is the Gina Gershon and Jennifer Tilly in this sort of. I don't know what you call it. It's a sort of a silhouette type of look to it with use of the red and the black, which is really cool. And indeed, too, we see some of the stills, which are part of the fold out here, and some of the artistic aspects of it, the contours of the art that are also motifs that are carried through from the cover art design here. This is great artwork. Art directors Eric Skillman, Sarah Habibi, designer Drusilla Adeline, Sister Hyde Design. Art production coordinator William Breeze, print production artist Craig Phillips, artist assistant Julie Sussman. So Sister Hyde, our dear friend Sister Hyde, friend of the channel Sister Hyde. Another great artwork, another success. Oh my goodness. Sister Hyde Design is just every moment is just another great success. And so I wish Drusilla nothing but the best. What a great, another great example of this artwork here. So well done indeed. I love this. And I should say too, the artwork is carried over through in terms of the contours of the inside as well. I love the use of the rope here. Bound. I mean, I forgot to mention too. Bound. I love the different meanings that the word bound can have. You know, at first I thought bound with the opening moments of one of the characters being bound by rope. But there's also the sense of bound and being tied to someone else, or maybe in a way that's suffocating, but also in a way that's also very liberating. And so we see characters that are bound to each other in a way that's maybe negative, but also characters that are bound to each other voluntarily in a way that's also very positive. So that's one thing, which is really great. Speaking of the insert, you know, this is a fold-out insert. Not a staple booklet, so I'm not a fan of the fold-out insert. I wish they could have gone with the staple booklet with more robust pages, but oh well, c'est la vie. That's okay, because in addition to some of the artistic touches as part of the insert, we also have the essay. And this is an essay called by Mackenzie Ward called Be Gay, Do Crime. This is another great one. This is a really, really great one. And I think, again, talking about what kind of impact this film had. I mean, it maybe didn't have the biggest commercial success out there, but it had a huge impact. It had a really huge impact, and part of the ways that it had an impact, again, as just expressed in this essay, is you know, in terms of the virtuosity of the Wachowskis announcing themselves to the world of cinema in terms of their directorial debut, and how entertaining and challenging and enthralling this film is, and also its impact in terms of depictions of sexuality. And so Mackenzie Ward talks here at opening moments of the essay, talking about it in terms of watching the film with lesbian girlfriend. And so this also leads into discussions of, again, just how important this film is in those depictions which I've referred to earlier in this video discussion. So, as well as talking about the contours of the plot and story structure and certain thematic concerns of the Wachowskis here in the context of Wachowski's filmography. This is a really great essay, a really, really fantastic essay. So my strong suggestion is please watch the film first. And then after you've seen the film, you can read this great essay. Once again, it's called Be Gay, Do Crime. And so please check this out if you can. Again, part of the insert here. And so with that, I will now put the insert back into the case as I found it when I first opened it. And I will close it here. And with that, I will conclude my remarks about the Criterion release of Bound. Or let me just say in final conclusion, I'm very impressed. I am very, very, very impressed. Not only is this a great revisiting of this film, a re-engagement of this film that I marvel at, and I'm just totally swept away by, and it's just announcing to the world the genius of the cinema of the Wachowskis, and also just learning so much and regarding it so much with a lens that maybe has certain familiarity from my earlier watches from many years back, but also with a sense of regarding again from different perspectives in terms of its long-lasting legacy. And so, I mean, and that's the stuff that I really, really love when it comes to releases like this from Criterion. You know, watching a film that I feel like I know, but then learning something new at the same time. So. And just enjoying it and being enthralled with it every step of the way. This is a really great film. This is the film which is Bound. All right, wow. So that's it for now, my dear friends. So I enjoyed that very much. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak about this release. And so until the next video, my dear friends, I very much hope that you continue to be happy and healthy and well, and that you continue to watch a lot of great movies, such as Bound, such as other films by the Wachowskis, such as other films in the Criterion Collection, and beyond. And so until the next video, my dear friends, stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.